I've heard people make jokes over the years of me growing up saying that if you want to hide something from a black person, put it in a book. So, I've gotten older. Now I hear people say the only things black people read is if it's something online. And as far as coming from Black America, the black community in this country, I have to say that I find it very disturbing how stupid and uneducated, and I hate to say this, but I have to believe the jokes. I have to believe what they said, because you can look on any social media site and see everything, any kind of buffoon show you can imagine, but you can't find anything about reparations. You don't find anything about what white America owes us. And this is not a debate. I know it's a lot of you undercover Negroes out there. I know there are a lot of you Negroes out there that hate Black America. You hate yourself, you hate your family, you hate your ancestors, you hate the skin that you wake up every day and have to look at. I know this. Every day I wake up, I have to stomach hearing black people argue amongst each other about Jesus and this fake ass religion that white people gave us. We argue about black men this, black women that. I mean, like, all across every social media site you can imagine, it's nothing but a complete buffoon show. And what's really fucked up is a lot of us don't realize there are a lot of black foreigners among us that do not like us. A lot of these Negroes among us are LGBT and they are not with us. A lot of these Negroes are just flat out traitors. But for me to have to sit here day in and day out, knowing what I know, and have to hear black people tell me about voting for Klan members. Every time I hear Negroes talking about police reform, do you not know before the police, right? They were called slave catchers, right? Patty rollers, right? Before that, they were just called Klan members. Angry groups of racist white folks. But see, there's a lot happening that I don't understand. Everywhere I look, you have these LGBT Negroes, the ones that want to lay up and date white folks, right? And don't get it fucked up. I see y'all. I know the game. You white females, you white males, got these niggas out here twerking. Look at Andrew Gillum. We sit here as a people and we talk about voting, participating in a system that has never served us and was never made to serve us. And on top of that, we try to convince each other that we can negotiate and be friends with European terrorists, white people, the original terrorists, the original killer of all things living. But fuck all of that. Just when you read some shit, or you begin to think that you've read enough, or you've just seen or read so much fucked up shit, it's fucked up because you always can find something else that white people have done to our black asses. Okay? White people have tortured and tormented and murdered and killed. They've cut off body parts. They've hung our people. They made trophies out of their ass. I mean, I don't understand where these Negroes of today come from. You know, like the Boyce Watkins, you know, the T.I.s, the Ice Cubes. Like, as black people, we don't understand when the joke is on us. We are the fucking butt of the joke. Anytime they have no respect for us, none whatsoever. Why? Because they always willing to march some LGBT Negro out here, or some fucking butt kissing bootlicking black entertainer. Let me start by saying for myself and my dead people in this country that these niggas, Negroes, whatever you want to call them, do not speak for me. Not no black contracts, not no none of that shit. None of these butt kissing niggas that's been ass kissing for the last 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 500 years. None of these niggas talk for me. But anyway, so you know, I run across something today, and basically it says the Arkansas Negro Boys Industrial School, right? So I get to reading about this shit. So it was a juvenile facility, basically. The juvenile facility was for black male youth in Arkansas. They had 2 locations in 1936. One was in Jefferson County, one was in Wrightsville, 10 miles southeast of Little Rock. A fire set at the dormitory at the Wrightsville location killed 21 of the black boys of the 69 who were padlocked in the room. Now, here we go. The fire. Now, so in the pre-dawn morning of March 5th, 1959, a fire was set in the dormitory of the Wrightsville facility. Arthur Ray Poole, age 16, one of 2 inmate sergeants with minor responsibilities, smelled the smoke. Police never investigated to determine who caused the fire, although it was later determined to have been set from outside sources. So they set the building on fire. Some niggas, some white folks outside came and set this place on fire, full of young black boys. Okay, now listen to this shit. The doors had been chained and locked at the dormitory, and the windows were covered with a heavy gauge wire mesh, I guess barbed wire, maybe, making escape nearly impossible. It says a 16-year-old night sergeant broke open one window, allowing for egress. I guess everybody could get the fuck out, right? 48 boys managed to escape while 21 burned to death. So 48 boys managed to get free and escape while 21 burned to death. Now, forgive me if I'm having a hard time reading this story, but when I first read about it, first started reading this shit, it's just very disturbing. And then I have to listen to black people argue and fight about who's the better white person, who's the better Klan member, who's been the least brutal to white people, right? So the families of the deceased said that the authorities told them that 14 of the dead boys were wrapped in newspaper and deposited in unmarked graves. Some family members were skeptical of the account the official gave of the burial. On the 50th anniversary of the fire, the families held a press conference at the Arkansas Capitol. But fuck all of that, right? These boys were in a building, right? 69 young black boys who literally were locked in, caged in, chains on the door, barbed wire on the fence, and they set the fucking building on fire. Their plan was to kill 69 black American boys back in 1959. Ain't that right? Right, 1959. 1959. And I have read a lot of stories. I have listened to a lot of shit, but I have never ever heard this story ever a day in my life. And so I find it very disgusting and sickening when white people try to tell me or other black people about morals or being human or humane. Please miss me with that bullshit. I'd really appreciate it. Now we're gonna go ahead, and I'm just gonna go ahead and just continue on. We're gonna go ahead and play this fucking video because of shit. I mean, for you to be trying to tell me about voting and I don't hear nothing about reparate, nigga, pay me. I'm not voting for no motherfucker. I don't want to hear no white people talking to me about black people this, black on black crime. I don't want to hear that bullshit. Don't message me about what you know. Don't send me comments about what you know. If you want to message me, talk about what these white folks owe black America. It ain't about what you know. Niggas, what they owe. But anyway, here we go.
In 1959, 21 African-American boys died in a school fire in Wrightsville. Now, decades later, you won't find a grave marker for them, nor will you find an official cause of the fire. It's a story possibly unknown or forgotten by many, but it's a chapter in history that's far from being closed. For the last 5 decades, every year has been 1959 for Frank Lawrence. For the majority of his life, Lawrence has been trying to solve one of Arkansas's greatest mysteries.
Nobody ever knew it existed because of the ability of the state of Arkansas to do such a fantastic job at covering it up.
March 5th, 1959, 69 African-American boys, ages 13 to 17, including Lawrence's 15-year-old brother, Lindsey Cross, were padlocked into their dormitory for the night at the Negro Boys Industrial School in Wrightsville. Around 4 a.m., a fire mysteriously ignited, forcing the boys to fight and claw their way out of the burning building.
But it was a carefully calculated murder that involved 21 boys, but it was designed to kill all 69 that were housed inside of this dormitory.
Lawrence's life's mission has been to uncover the truth surrounding what he calls Arkansas's secret holocaust, which coincidentally is also the focal point of author Griffin Stockley's latest work.
That most of the boys who were killed had run back to a corner of the building.
When the smoke cleared that March morning, the 21 boys that had burned to death were found piled on top of one another in the corner of the dormitory. The 48 that had survived managed to escape by prying off mesh metal screens from 2 windows.
If you look at the diagram, you can see that although there were a couple of doors, in fact, we know that there was nobody there to unlock the doors.
The horrific event briefly made headlines that also brought attention to the squalor and deplorable conditions the boys had been subjected to.
The boys went around in rags. They had one 30-gallon water tank for them to use to take baths.
According to Stockley, the boys in the school were committed for being orphaned, homeless, or for committing offenses described as mischief and alleged petty crimes. The school and the treatment of the children became a fiery representation of segregation within the South during the Jim Crow era.
The whole part of this is about our history of white supremacy and the way African Americans have been discriminated against historically in Arkansas. I mean, you know, it was never separate but equal. It was always unequal.
Now, almost 60 years after the horrific fire, both Lawrence and Stockley are hoping to spark a fresh look at the fire and its cause.
For the fact that it was in such deteriorated condition that probably the fire started because of the wiring.
So was it gross negligence that led to the death of the boys, or were they burned alive intentionally?
So everyone wants to conclude that it was an accident to prevent putting any more embarrassment on the state of Arkansas and the efforts of Orville Faubus.
2 years before the fire, Little Rock and Governor Orville Faubus gained national attention in 1957 during the desegregation crisis at Central High School. Faubus again made headlines when he shut down Little Rock high schools for the 1958-1959 school year, often referred to as the lost year. Lawrence believes the events that followed added fuel to the Wrightsville school's flames.
This Holocaust and this murder is a seminal event that was designed to trigger an action by the African American community to say, oh no, we're not going to try to integrate schools anymore. We'll go ahead and be separate but equal, but we're going to stop this desegregation activity.
Prior to the fire, Governor Faubus had toured the Wrightsville school and saw firsthand the conditions in which the boys lived, but made no recommendations for change. However, newspaper articles reported Faubus appeared disturbed by the deaths of the 21 boys, calling the fire inexcusable. He immediately called for a hearing to determine who may have been responsible for the deaths of the children.
The very morning that these boys were killed, they're dismantling this whole scene with hoses, rakes, and shovels. They're tearing it apart like they're trying to cover up something.
The school staff and superintendent all gave their accounts of what happened that night of the fire, noting that the boys had been locked in and left unsupervised for the night. Conversely, a Pulaski County grand jury found that numerous individuals and agencies were responsible, but ultimately they returned no criminal charges.
Unfortunately, it's just like blaming everybody and nobody.
In the meantime, in an ironic twist, the land in which the school stood is now the Arkansas Department of Correction Facility, Wrightsville Unit, where you won't find a plaque to indicate the boys ever lived or died there.
That the bodies are in here in this open space where there's no markers.
The same omission exists at their supposed mass grave, which can be found at the Haven of Rest Cemetery in Little Rock.
The bodies was brought out here and a mass grave was dug, just a series of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 through 14, and the bodies were interred there.
According to cemetery records, hours after the fire, what little remained of the boys who died was taken to a local funeral home. According to Stephanie Webb, several sources say the boys' body parts were brought over wrapped in newspaper.
Most of the bodies were brought to Dubison Funeral Home, which of course now no longer exists. And as far as how they were received, I mean, there's a lot of questionable stuff.
The parents of the boys could come in and pick out body parts a la carte and claim that they were their children.
7 of the 21 boys were buried privately by their families. The other 14 are supposedly buried in a mass grave. Their brief funeral and burial paid for by the state of Arkansas.
After the ceremony was over, the family members were ushered away from the cemetery and not allowed to view the internment into the burial plot. So they never saw coffins go into the ground.
And as for a grave marker,
because the records indicate Ann Marker. It had Ann Marker on the records. Bronze memorial for the 14 boys who were buried. That's what it says.
So where is it?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
So what is the truth surrounding the death and burial of the Wrightsville boys? The truth is, we may never know. But Lawrence and Stockley both hope their upcoming books expose the perception that Arkansas apparently put little value on those young boys' lives.
We have to feel some pain at some point about these things, as opposed to dismissing them as, you know, kind of an academic exercise or just part of our pathetic history of race relations in Arkansas and the South.
The Claims Commission ruled in September of 1959 to award the estates of each of the 21 boys $2,500. But Lawrence says his family only received $1,400. In the meantime, he hopes one day to gain the rights to exhume his brother's remains for a proper burial. Both Lawrence's book, Locked In and Burned, America's Secret Holocaust, and Stockley's book, Black Boys Burning, both come out later this year.